Today's lecture is about annual worth comparisons. Recall that we're looking at three different ways of comparing alternatives. One is a present worth comparison, the annual worth comparison is the second one, and thirdly, rate of return comparisons. Today's lecture is on annual worth comparison, the second of these three. And recall that, although it's called annual worth comparison, what we're doing is converting everything to an annuity and comparing these two annuities. And we take the term annual worth because usually these annuities are on a yearly basis. Of course, we can convert between a present worth and an annuity freely using either the series present worth factor or the capital recovery factor. So there's no doubt that if we're comparing things on a present worth basis or on a basis of annuity through the annual worth comparison, the results are going to be exactly the same. The main reason we have these two different choices is because there is extra value in using an annual worth comparison on certain occasions. For example, let's say you're choosing whether to buy a car or not. If you make a present worth comparison of those two choices, you'll end up comparing two fairly large numbers, let's say $50,000 and $48,000. And you can conclude that the cheaper one, the $48,000, is the correct choice. It gives you a relative ranking between the alternatives, but there's very little beyond that. If, however, you use an annual worth comparison, and you conclude that, for example, the more expensive car is $6,000 per year, and the cheaper car is $57,000 per year, you get the same relative ranking of the two alternatives, but suddenly has some extra meaning there, because it means something to us to talk about $6,000 per year that we lose when we take it to a present worth comparison. And this is because we're used to paying out for our car on an annual basis. We would pay annual insurance, and we can imagine our gas costs accumulating for the year. And we can even have some idea intuitively as to how much the purchase cost would be spread over those years. So there's meaning to that. That's extra. That's beyond just simply the relative meaning of which one's cheaper. There's an absolute meaning as well. So this is where annual worth comparisons are particularly handy, is where you've got some intuition about what the yearly cost should feel like. Not all decisions have that part to them. And if that intuition isn't important, well, then what we want to do is to choose the annual worth comparison or the present worth comparison, which is easier to compute. That's the sensible choice. But where we can take advantage of that intuition of the yearly cost, then the annual worth comparison offers that extra advantage. Let's look at an example of an annual worth comparison or annual cost comparison. University of Waterloo is considering two alternative plans for a new athletic stadium. We have a choice of concrete bleachers or wooden bleachers on earth fill. So they'd put some dirt in to raise the level of the ground before they build the bleachers. And for each of these two alternatives, we have some costs. The life of the concrete bleachers is 90 years, and for the wooden bleachers, we have to replace the bleachers every 30 years, and the earth fill lasts the entire 90 years. So you can see there's a natural study period of 90 years for this problem. And we're asked to compare the equivalent annual costs for each alternative. The equivalent annual cost is another way of saying the annual worth comparison. So what we want to do is convert the cash flows associated with this alternative now to an annuity, and we know how to do this. For the concrete bleachers, the annuity amount is going to be the first cost of $350,000 taken to an annuity at the 7% interest over the 90 years, plus the annual upkeep cost of $2,500. And if we work that through, we'll get $27,056. So that $27,056 is saying the equivalent cost on an annual basis of this entire concrete bleachers project is $27,000 per year. For the wooden bleachers, we've got several components to the calculation. because we've got the earth fill, we've got the original bleachers that are part of the first costs, and then we've got every 30 years more bleachers. So we can take our first cost of $200,000 and bring it to present worth over the 90 years. We've also got our replacement bleachers. The first set occurs 30 years from now. The second set occurs 60 years from now. Now, the whole project lasts 90 years, but we don't need another set of bleachers at the end of the 90 years because they'd be brand new and they'd never be used. The ones that we buy at the end of 60 years will last for 30 years. They'll be worn out at the end of 90 years and everything will balance out. So in addition to the bleachers that come as part of the first cost, we really only have two more purchases of bleachers. One 30 years from now, so that's $30,000. Sorry, excuse me, $100,000. 30 years from now, so we bring that to present worth over the 30 years. So that $100,000 now, so far, is a present worth. I can add to that the $100,000 60 years from now. To make that a present worth, and then take the whole thing to an annuity. Using the capital recovery factor, right? So there are two purchases of bleachers, one 30 years from now, one 60 years from now. There's no convenient way of converting that cash flow 30 years from now directly into an annuity over the 90 years, other than taking it to a present worth first, and then spreading it out over the 90 years from the present worth. I do the same thing for both the purchase 30 years from now and the purchase 60 years from now. So that's the replacement bleachers. And the final component of the cost is the $5,000 per year maintenance. And we end up with a total cost of $20,075 on an annualized basis. So for concrete bleachers, it's $27,000 per year. For the wooden bleachers, it's $20,000 per year approximately. Since the concrete bleachers cost $7,000 more per year, the wooden bleachers are a better purchase. So you can see the annual worth comparison method is quite straightforward. Rather than, as with present worth, taking everything to a present worth, we simply take the cash flows to an annuity and compare the value of the annuity. That annuity represents a cost per year, but since we're covering the expenses on average with that cost over the lifetime of the asset, that's a fair comparison. Thank you.